Hi there. My name's Jerry Huntman. I'm the Managing Director of IFWG, and we've got a really good time of the year happening for us because we've got four fantastic new books coming out over the next 4 weeks, and we want to interview each of the authors separately. And this is the first one. It's with Matt Tighe, and his book is Drowning in the Dark and Other Stories. And it's a collection of horror fiction, but I'm not going to say too much about it because I'd rather talk to Matt about it. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Matt and then we'll have a bit of a conversation.
Hi, Jerry.
G'day, Matt. How are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad. Now, you're based in northern New South Wales somewhere, aren't you?
Yes, I'm based in Armidale, which,
Mm,
for people who aren't familiar, it's about halfway between Sydney and Brisbane, but a couple of hours inland up on top of the mountain range.
yeah.
It's nice and
Just for your
cold.
interest, I used to live in Tamworth for a couple of years when I was a kid, which is not too far away.
No,
And we used to fish at a place called Keep It Dam. Does that ring a bell?
yes, yes. I spent several school camps at Keep It Dam.
Hmm.
Didn't catch many fish though.
Okay. Look, I just discovered something that we had in common. I had to say it straight away. Look. I mean, maybe the very first thing we should do is for you to just give a bit of a brief idea of who you are. Now, you've already stated where you are, but
Mhm.
if you can just give a little bit of a background to people who aren't familiar with you, mate.
Oh, okay. Obviously, I'm a speculative fiction and horror writer. I'm also a professor of environmental science. Work at a university, a small university here in Armidale, University of New England. I live on a small farm just outside of town. I have many ducks and chooks and cows and sheep, those sorts of things. 3 children, wonderful wife. Um, yeah, and I guess as far as writing goes, I dabbled in it 15 years ago. So obviously I was always interested reading and writing. And then sort of life intervened. I came back to it maybe about 2 months before COVID hit. I thought, oh, I'll get back into writing and see how it goes, and remembered or found out very quickly how hard it all was. Persevered that time, and yeah, now it's what, 5 years later. So this is where I'm at the moment.
How did your writing? I mean, this is straight away you mentioned the just before COVID, which is really interesting because you wanted to start something that's got some time intensivity to it, and then COVID hits, and potentially it may have given you some time. Would that have been the case?
Um, I think it did. It was a little bit. It's a little bit hard to tell objectively, and obviously we build these stories around ourselves as we go along. We had just moved out of town to a small bush block as long-term house sitting, just to see how it would go with the kids. I'm from a farming background, and so is my wife. But we thought, oh, we'll see how going out of town goes with the kids. And we had literally just moved in and thought, okay, well, settle in. And then COVID hit, and we had the lockdowns, and all the kids were at home and homeschooling and all that sort of stuff. But I think you're right. In amongst all of that, there was more time, forced time. You weren't going anywhere or doing anything. And I look back now, I look through my files and folders at all the drafts that I wrote and half finished stories and even things that I submitted around at the time. And I think, well, there was quite a volume. Um, and most of it was terrible. I was getting back into it, feeling my way. And I think because there was, that forced time, it was almost like a speed run of not getting better, because you're always getting better, but or hopefully, but of just, you know, knocking things out, developing that thick skin from rejection, writing so many things and thinking, oh, this is such an amazing new idea, and then turning around 2 days later and finding 10 stories that are the same that people have published somewhere, and thinking, oh, I need to get more familiar with what's happening and the tropes and all of that sort of stuff. So it was kind of like a forced crash course, if you will, particularly in short fiction, because I did decide an active decision when I was getting back into it. I thought, well, I better not just jump in and try and write something that was very long. I better learn how to structure things right from the sentence and upwards, and spend a fair bit of time doing short stories, flash fiction, maybe the occasional novella, and make sure I knew that the approach to those things that worked or maybe didn't work before I delved into longer things. And that, of course, took a long time.
It always does, and it's interesting that you mentioned the short. You're making a conscious decision to do short. I mean, as a writer, I made the conscious decision to do short fiction as well for a long time, and longer than you actually. But and also, as a publisher, I talk to a lot of authors, and quite a few of them start with that direct approach. Perhaps the only exceptions are those who just can't get their heads around short fiction. There are some who can't, but I think the majority can. And to be honest with you, I think the path that you took is absolutely the sensible path. Uh, it's not just about practicing writing by writing short fiction. It's about getting feedback. It's a lot of things.
And yeah, I absolutely, and even the more sort of prosaic side of things, like, oh well, how do you go about drafting a cover letter and going through submissions and getting a feel for outlets and timing, and getting some of those nasty rejections and things when where you don't hear back ever, those sorts of things, and just going, okay, that's the lay of the land.
it is. It is absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
look, I mean, okay. So just before COVID, you decided to write. Through COVID, I mean, through COVID and subsequently, you've been writing, and I'm absolutely aware that over recent years, you certainly have made headway in terms of getting your stuff out. And without trying to swell your head, you've won a few regional awards, and they're strong awards too. Aurealis, and the Shadows, for example. So, what do you think clicked? What point? At what point and in what way did it click where you felt that you had something that was a little bit more polished, a little bit more, I suppose you could say, pro level? That's a poor word, but you know what I mean. When do you think that happened, and what caused it?
Um, it's a really good question, and I think I don't think there was any real aha moment. And all this has to be prefaced by the fact that a lot of what I write is junk still, and I think that's the same for everybody.
Yeah, it is.
And you put it away and you think, oh, I'll come back to look at that maybe in 6 months, 12 months, even longer, when I'm not so close to it, and see if there's something there. But I think when I really started to get less rejections, more holds, more acceptances, and have that feeling in yourself when you went, okay, this may not be award winning, but this thing that I've written is good, and I can kind of feel that. I'm not umming and ahhing about it. It was when I slowed down, when I found when I first started, and I was almost frantic to, I'd have an idea for a story, and often with me, I know it's different for everyone. I'll have a beginning image and often the end sentence or two. So I'll be like, oh, well, I just need to get between them. And I found that I was just rushing, I was just running through the whole gamut of everything that was in between. And when I started to actually take stock of how many things I was submitting, how many rejections I was getting, and I thought, well, it's not a quantity fight. It's a, I need to slow down. I need to slow my paragraph to paragraph writing down and think about what each sentence is trying to actually say, rather than treating a lot of it like it was just a placeholder to get to the next thing that I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, that seemed to help,
Yeah.
slowing down, within each story, and not being afraid to just put things aside, no matter how enamored I was of the idea or the story. If I got to the point going, this is like pulling teeth. This is really hard, and I'm not making any headway. Then
Mm-hmm.
just to let it rest. And that, I think, that came with realizing that. I think that speed and that hurry to submit things is often when you think, oh, this is the thing I've got, and I may not have anything else. When you realize that ideas, that there are a lot of ideas. You're always having ideas. Some of them are terrible, some of them are good. It's not really a well that seems to run dry very often,
Mm-hmm.
completely. Anyway, I
No,
hope
no,
that
no.
was, yeah.
That's good. You've given. Perfectly answered it. I get a sense of roughly where. I'm not talking about a month or a year or whatever. I'm, in
Mm,
the continuum. I get it, and I also understand very much your point. I think if you very rarely have a dry well, I think you're already 90% in a good place because
mm.
you've got something that you can grab onto when you want to, and that's a good thing, even if it means letting go of some things for a while.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and you do have that bank of things that you can go back and
Mm,
you know play with or look at and think, oh well, was there something there or not? And then obviously the gold standard is the story that just drops into your head almost fully formed, and you sit and you write it, and it's a joy from beginning to end, which is rare but lovely when it happens. We actually, incidentally, that was the first story that I had accepted with one of your anthologies, Jerry, was A Good Big Brother, which won the Shadows Award. That's what happened with that. I saw the call and I
mm.
thought, I can't write a story about pregnancy. Um, and then about 2 seconds later, the whole story fell into my head. So I sat and I wrote it in one afternoon. Then I did a left it for a day, did another pass, and submitted it. Um, and
Yeah,
that was
that was Spawn. That was a Spawn.
yes, that was Spawn. Yep.
And I'm mentioning it because then I'll flash it on the screen in a few seconds,
Mhm.
or may have already done it with the power of hindsight. But yeah, that was a fantastic anthology to have published,
Yes.
and I certainly appreciate that you chose to have a unique and sort of indirect approach to the theme of what Spawn was about. So yeah, and look, and it's great. And I'm glad to hear that it was one of those stories. As a writer myself, I can honestly say maybe 1 in 10 stories are stories that you can just, oh wow, and you sit down and you
Yeah.
just keep on typing. Um,
Yeah.
it's not going to be perfect, but oh my God, I just typed 10,000 words or 5,000 words.
Yeah. I don't think
Mm,
there's not many other feelings that come close to it, actually. Just having
mm.
having that pour out,
Mm,
and having that feeling going, oh, this is something.
absolutely. Yeah. And any writer, I think, who'll be watching this show will no doubt be nodding their heads violently at this point in time. But look, I mean, we've talked about a lot about the origins and some of your background. Let's drill a little bit deeper now. Let's go a little bit deeper or closer to the whole point of this interview. Horror, right? You introduced yourself as a horror writer, or maybe horror and speculative fiction writer, I
Well,
think you
yes,
mentioned.
but
Uh,
horror is my first love always.
well, actually, now that you've stated that, why?
Good question. I mean, if I was going to get philosophical about it, I think it's it is about connection. It's about it's kind of it's the same as fiction in general. For me, fiction is about sort of showing that you're human, showing other people that there are connections to be made, and that there's empathy within what you write and what you put out to other people. And maybe this sounds a bit strange, but horror is just that in spades. It it's just the visceral reaction. It's showing our humanity, putting your characters in extreme and difficult situations and seeing how human they are. And so as a writer, that's what you want when you're writing, and that's what you want your readers to experience. You want them to experience a connection. And when things are horrible, that's when humanity's laid bare, I think.
That chimes with me what you just said. I think all art is that, and I'm sure that that's what you inferred anyway.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
came back. I just went to a concert last night. Live. I love live performance, and the best songs are the songs where where the singer who wrote this, in the case of where they wrote the song, just rips open their chest and shows you their heart. That's a metaphor, but on the other hand, the beauty of horror, I think, again, what you've said is that it's where where the metaphor can really sledgehammer you.
yeah.
And yeah.
I think that there is, sometimes you hear people talk about horror, proponents of it, and they say, it's the comfort of being safe, having your fear, but being safe too, having your cake and eating it too. But I think it's the same thing. It's you having these very strong reactions, whether you're writing or you're reading, but it's a comfort that knowing that other people are experiencing this, that you are experiencing it, and it is part of the world. Maybe it's not a shambling monster chasing you down, but the feelings are there, and it's part of what holds us all together.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I think what you've just talked about it rings very true with me. The interesting thing is that you could write fantasy or you could write science fiction. And aside from the fact that you can blend and you can have something incredibly disturbing in a science fiction or a fantasy setting or whatever, without strictly being horror. Um, but I'm interested a bit more about the horror side of it, right? What is it? I mean, it's not just what you like to write. It's also you're hoping that there are readers who can chime in and love what what you're reading. So you mentioned that I get the feeling that you're talking about your love for horror in respect to what you've just said is because it's so intense.
Yes, yeah, I
Is
think
it
so.
the intensity?
It's the intensity. I think it's there, and this is just for me, obviously, but it's easier to put parts of yourself on the page. Um, it's, I think I said this before, it's a more visceral sort of reaction to things. And if you, it's, I'm not qualified to say this, but it's kind of like getting your trauma out. Um, you know, you you have your own baggage, and for me, horror is a much uh, expressing that and showing people, that these things are universal. The way that you feel, the terrible things that you may experience, whether it's a metaphor on the page or whether it's something that's more day to day. In a horror setting, it's something that yeah, it's for me, for science fiction and fantasy, which I love as well. There's more layers to get
Mm,
through. Um,
mm.
for horror, it's like humanity laid bare, for better or worse.
Yep, but that's fair enough. And I mean, there's a lot of interesting conversations about horror and science fiction, fantasy, how they interrelate, how they are separate. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's what you like to write. It's like what gets your blood rushing, and hopefully readers can get it as well. And based
I,
on your, yep.
I suspect it all comes back to the back when I was younger, and you know, I lived on a farm near a small town, and I had won a book voucher for some competition at school. And the book voucher, the only place that you could use it was at the local newsagents, and they had a very small sort of um, almost like one of those turnstile, that have the books on them.
Mm,
And there was a Stephen King book on that. It was Four Past Midnight, the collection of four novellas. And that was where it all started for me. I was like, oh, well, obviously I'd had, a lot of exposure to similar things at the libraries and small libraries and whatnot. But that was the one where I went, oh, I'm going to buy this big fat horror book
mm.
and sit and read it. And I've still got it on the shelf behind me.
Ah,
Um,
actually, by coincidence, that's one of my early ones too. So I can say that straight out to you. So that's interesting. Another thing we have in common.
okay.
Um, okay, so we've got now, and now you've already mentioned one story, and it just so happens that that story is also in this collection, and which is nice. It's a nice segue. Uh, and it should be in that collection too. I mean, when you especially your first collection, you want the cream of the cream of your work, but at the same time, I mean, certainly one of the things that as a publisher, I don't want even in a collection. Normally, I don't want to have nothing but reprints in it. For me, I really love to have at least a portion of it to be original, and it's not just a monetary thing, in the sense of, hey, there could be people who've already got your book, your story, so therefore they won't buy the book. It's not that. I think in many cases, a lot of stories that are published by short stories published by authors, they actually end up being very hard to access over time. And that's really what the collection is partly for, I think. It's getting it together and letting it have a stronger life, durability. And that probably is my biggest reason. But having a few originals in it just makes it juicy. Um, so that's my policy, and then we collaborated on that.
Mhm.
Um, Now, so you've got a bunch of stories, and I'm willing to bet a lot of money that those stories only represent a relatively small fraction of what you have written and what you have published combined. So, give us a bit of a thought. Give us your thoughts on what you chose, why you chose, and also to some extent the order in which you wanted them to be uh, presented in the book, because that's a bit of an art form in itself. So, some thoughts, please.
Um, this is interesting because someone else asked me this last week, and I showed them my spreadsheet, which
Ah,
I have. So yeah, I guess probably because I have a scientific background, that was my first thought. I I had a novella that I really liked, and I wanted to include that, which is called Drowning in the Dark, the title story. And so straight from the outset, I decided that I wanted that to kind of be the flavor and the theme that would run through stories. So then what I did was I made a spreadsheet and I listed off all of my darker stories that I thought might fit the brief. And then I listed off what I considered all the main themes for each story and their word count. And then I sat for a while and I moved them around, deciding on order and exclusions and inclusions. And mostly what I wanted to do was I wanted to mix up the pacing so there wasn't too many longer stories together and not too many shorter stories together. So I thought, well, okay, for me personally, when I look through these and I think, okay, it's getting a bit heavy there a little bit. If I imagine if I was reading it, I would be wanting to take a metaphorical breath, maybe, so that I would move the order of the stories around. Think like, okay, maybe you have a shorter story here, a flash story, a flash fiction, or something like that. And then there are a few pieces in there that are probably considered. There's at least one that's horror comedy, and there's a couple that probably fall more into the bittersweet or dark fiction categories rather than horror. And they're in there for that reason, to sort of just slow the pacing, change the theme a little bit before we delve back into things that may be a little bit more heavy going. So that took a while, and it took a few revisions and a few stories that I really love. Got the axe, and at least one story I wrote because I was looking at the order. I thought, no, I need something else in here, so that went in. Tailor made, which is called Jericho and the Cursed Forest, which is roughly around the middle of the book. That was done to sort of change the pace and change the theme a little bit, because I thought things were getting a bit heavy. Yeah, so that was it. Yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate. I mean, I think some people, some people are they fly by the seat of their pants, right? They just do it by gut. I mean, you chose to look at it from a more systematic sort of way, and goodness gracious, it's as good a way as any, and it probably has a greater chance of covering for more bases by just simply doing that.
Well, it made me feel more comfortable
Mm,
and more relaxed with what I was sending to you, Jerry.
mm, mm,
And also, it is actually something that I find myself thinking about when I'm reading a collection. If I, if I find myself putting it down
mm,
because I'm like, oh, I finished one story, I think that was a great story. Oh, here we go again.
mm,
And I might put it down there for a while, because
mm,
I get the feeling that the next story is going to be, a very similar flavor or a
mm,
very
mm.
similar length. So I wanted to avoid that as much as I could.
No, no, that's great, and certainly. Oh, look, I mean, we had great pleasure in publishing it, and part of that pleasure wasn't just the quality of the fiction, but it was the way it was put together. I note that when you mentioned that you didn't quite encompass the entire sequence of stories as being what you would define as horror, which is sort of the disturbing sort of book
Mm.
story, having a couple of things that break it up. Interestingly enough, that fits very well with the title, the full title of the book, which is "Drowning in the Dark and Other Stories." It's not "Drowning in the Dark and Other Horror Stories," and I'm sure that was intentional as well.
Yes, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it was. And having said that, some of the things that I loved just didn't make it. there are plenty of things in there, and a couple of the things that don't aren't classified as horror, they just fell into the category of, oh, they have to go in. I need to see them in the in the list. So,
I'm absolutely certain that most readers are happy with that type of arrangement. I mean, just because someone's a die-hard horror writer doesn't mean they don't want a little chuckle to break it up, or a little bit of eyebrow raising, but not in a horror sense.
hmm.
So that's really really cool. Oh, you mentioned Stephen King as being your first true influencer, if that's the right term.
Yeah, I'd say so, but I mean that I
Mm,
fall into the huge majority with that one, I think.
yeah, I'm going to ask you a compulsory question that I tend to ask everyone because it just gives people. It's not only just interesting, but also it means that potential readers can have got a reference point to work with when they consider buying your book. Um, what other writers have influenced you? And I would ask you, and I suspect just like me, there's so many, it becomes difficult to identify and classify. But more in relation to maybe some of the stories that you've written in this particular collection. Um, are there any writers that have influenced you that maybe you've drawn a little bit more from for
Hmm.
this sort of work?
That's a really good question. Because it's hard to, obviously you have your big list of people,
Hmm.
but it's hard to go, okay, well, which ones map to the stories that are in the collection? Um,
And I'm not asking you to map them. I mean, that would
no,
be
no,
unfair.
that's just
Yeah,
that's just where my
yeah,
head goes.
yeah.
Um, mm. And this is two spring to mind that aren't exactly horror writers, but have that they do skew dark, or they did, as Ray Bradbury and Theodore Sturgeon, which I just love. For that sort of surreal skew, that tends towards dark. I don't write a lot of very gory splatterpunk type stuff. I like it. I just don't. I skew myself more towards the sort of the slow burn, the psychological um, type approach, and I find that they're great at that. I really enjoy Karen Warren. Um, Her stuff, I'm I'm a very big fan of. Alan Baxter, I
Mm.
I really like his stuff. Blood Covenant, that was out not long ago. That sort of stuff. It has a very very unique Australian feel to it,
Hmm.
which I'm always chasing.
Yep.
Um, but if we go back to sort of things from years ago, hmm, I was on a big Odd Thomas bent for a long time with Dean Koontz, and I think I got myself sick of that actually after so many of them. Um, but I do like his sort of
Mm.
strange, the way that everyday life just pivots into the very strange setup of things. And I think that's something that I tend to reflect in my writing as well. Um,
You mentioned Ray Bradbury, and as soon as you said that, I thought of A Good Big Brother.
I,
Uh, and the reason why is because uh, A Good Big Brother, um, most of the horror, most of the atmosphere of the horror is off scene, which is a very powerful and very mature technique writing horror. It doesn't mean you always should do it, but
mm,
the beauty of doing it that way is because if you do choose to go suddenly hard, it hits harder. But in that story, I don't think you. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I don't believe that you let a lot of the horror really off off scene. Um,
Yep.
and Ray Bradbury was good at that. And
Yes.
and the other thing that Ray Bradbury often wrote, many of his stories, not all of his stories by a long shot, but some of the more memorable stories of Ray Bradbury, and I can't remember the names of them, I'm afraid. It's just my brain's not good enough at the moment. But he has written stories that are set in rural environments and in very homely environments. And these are two elements that I also sense and get from A Good Big Brother. Am I right or wrong? I mean,
No, I think so, and that's where my
mm,
I, probably part of why I like his writing so much, because
mm,
it speaks to my own upbringing and background, and
mm,
I find those sort of settings natural places to start in a lot of my short stories as well.
mm,
You know, a lot of things I write, because the novella "Drowning in the Dark" that's set in a small country town, um,
mm,
of from the point of view of a child that lives on a small sort of bush block on the
mm,
edge of town. Those sorts of settings, that
mm, mm.
they're for me they're easy to write, and they're easy to have a large unknown in the background. So maybe it harkens back to laying in bed of a summer night and listening to the windmill crank outside, and whatever was moving in the dark, and knowing that there was 8,000 acres between us and the neighbor. um it's it kind of it's a nice setting to start with, in certain sense.
No, no, it makes sense to me. Okay. Maybe I'll just switch the question a teeny bit, just slightly, because what we've talked about, what your influences were, what you've got now, and this is what we're celebrating really. If with this interview is what's just about to come out, and actually this is probably a good point to say that it's the world release is officially on the 6th of October, which is a Monday. But you did mention before that you liked science fiction and fantasy, but horror was your penchant.
Mhm.
Um, is there any um, give us have you thought about bridging out of horror or into subgenres of horror that you haven't touched yet?
Things I haven't touched, or have touched and went, oh, I'm not good enough to do that as yet, I've got to get better.
Mm,
Is really good horror comedy. And I don't mean the extreme sort of Five Nights at Freddy's or what, yeah.
mm,
But things where the baseline start of reality is skewed and people take it as given, and go from there. That stuff I love when it's done. It's very satirical, very sort of can be tongue in cheek, and seems like a very good way of juxtapositioning where we are as a society, and how people view those things, like, individually. There's an amazing book, I think it's amazing, by Jasper Ford, called Early Riser.
mm,
And it's not a horror, but it's full of things that you could take as horror. And
mm,
the premise is, you know uh, a whole society that's evolved around hibernation of humans through the extremely cold winters. So there's this very strange, told, from it's a very personal account from one person, and there's this very strange thread that runs through it, of people just casually dying, and body parts being shared around, and people sacrificing themselves for the greater good, and it might just get a nod, and on everyone goes. um and it's at one level, it's a very, very, yeah, like, personal account, and there's a lot of this self angst, and high stakes for this one character, and then around them people are dropping like flies, and it's in this very casual sense, and it's done wonderfully, and that's something that I would aspire to achieve at some point.
Okay,
something.
no,
Yeah, yeah.
that sounds challenging. I must admit, I've never
Yes,
sort of touched on that spot very much at all.
yeah. It's very
The
satirical. Yeah.
well, see, this is the thing about horror. I mean, I'd like to hear your views on this too. I mean, for me, horror is. I mean, I know it's a genre. It is a genre, right? It's recognizable, it's identifiable, whatever. But at the same time, there's a very thick grey area that surrounds the perimeter of horror, and it's about uh, its objective is to disturb, create that catharsis, but at the same time, all the other literary elements are there. And so, what you just talked about, um, where there's a very strong satirical element to it, but that doesn't stop it from necessarily being horror, as long as there's enough of it to identify as horror. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I come from with horror, and it sounds to me like maybe that's where you come from as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think in that sense that horror's greatest strength is also its weakness in that it creates such a visceral reaction in the reader and a reviewer or critiquer, in that maybe they don't see all those literary tools and techniques because they're having that very strong reaction first. But they're all of those things are there, and a well-written piece of dark fiction or horror is well, it's chef's kiss, really, because of
Uh,
that.
I mean, I mean, a big percentage of our output for IFWG is horror, and it's not a coincidence, right? It's not like, oh, just by coincidence we decided to do that. It's because the movers and shakers within our own company just so happen to love the stuff too. It's that simple, really. Look, okay, I want to wind it up fairly soon, but maybe it's worthwhile talking a little bit about what's cooking in your kitchen. What is it that you're doing now, or any big ambitious thing that you are looking forward to doing? What's on your plate at the moment?
I have decided that well, I did decide that it's beyond time that I delved into longer pieces. And I found myself writing a couple of, well, a steampunk manuscript, but it's very dark. It's it's a, I think you would say it was a dark steampunk
There's
novel.
nothing wrong with dark steampunk.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just trying to think of the best way of describing it. Um, it got me a fellowship at Varuna, at the National Writers House, an excerpt from that. So I went down and worked on that for a while, and that's been progressing pretty well. Um, and I've got a couple of novellas in the works as well. And I find myself now, maybe it's the downside of having spent so much time practicing on short stories and trying to get those things right, that I keep slipping back into, I'll have my longer stuff that I'm working on, and I keep slipping over it and think, oh, I'll just write this idea down. It's a short story. So at the moment I'm training myself to get to back into the longer stuff, but I have one novel finished, another one that's very close to being finished. So those ones will be tied up soon, and I'll see what I'm going to do with those. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've got a fair bit of work already under the belt, and no doubt work that will take your time in the creative space, running into the future as well. So that's good. I mean, that's what you want. You don't want to rest. There's no such thing as retirement in writing.
Mm, right. That's true. That's true. I just have to
Hmm.
I have to make a decision as to when I sit down, what's the focus going to be on? rather than going, oh, I'm just going to chase the thing that I'm interested in. That's my bane. That's the thing that I'm terrible at.
Okay, fair enough. Well, look, I just want to, unless you want there's something to talk about, I think we covered, actually indirectly, which is the best way to do it, is we covered a fair bit about drowning in the dark. I mean, we've covered it like about 5 or 6 spots. I believe that uh, those who are viewing this interview, this chat, probably have a good sense of what we've got in there, and not only in terms of direct content, but also the way your DNA is operating, which is really what we want. I'm certainly excited by it coming out. In fact, I'm super excited. It's and also I love the cover by Greg
Oh,
Chapman. Mm,
Greg did such a wonderful job.
mm.
And both him and you were wonderful putting up with me saying, "Oh, but what about you just tweak this?" But yeah, that's me.
I don't mind.
It's
I don't mind feedback from authors with it when it comes to covers, um, as long as there's enough commonality, another and civility, and there was plenty. So there was no problem at all. It turned into a fantastic thing. I'll show the full cover so that everyone can see it better uh, at some point during this interview. Um, I just wanted to say something very quickly, if you don't mind, to viewers. Uh, with Australian and New Zealand interested parties who want to buy the book, I should make this point. IFWG is an Australian company, and we mostly sell Australian product. So, in other words, our authors, our editors, almost all of them are Australian. Not all of them, and we're very proud of all our creatives. But we are a international company, and our supply chain is based in the United States. What that means is that most of our production and most of our distribution is centered in the United States. What that means is that when we do a global release of a book, um, it actually, based in the United States, it spiders to the UK, to Europe very quickly. It's much slower to Australia and New Zealand. And so what we have is a partnership with another distributor. So our distributor plus New South Books, based in Sydney, have a partnership, and they draw from the United States, but we solve the problem a bit by getting mini and medium-sized print runs done, and we populate the warehouse of our Australian distributor to try to speed things up and get the price down. Now, I made this long-winded, and the reason why is because sometimes there's a lag between our global release date and suddenly the book's being available in Australia. So I just want to ask anyone who's viewing this to be patient. Go to almost any store that you want to, online or whatever. Ask if the book's not there. The books, the price in Australian dollars is $24.95 for this particular book. In the US, it's $14.99. In America, it's fine, but if that price is over $24.95 in Australia, it means that the retailer is sourcing it from the United States, and they haven't yet caught up with the uh, availability of the book through New South Books. So be patient, please. It should only be a matter of a week or so after the release. But I just don't want you guys to suddenly spend $30, $40 for a book, which you shouldn't spend $30, $40. So sorry I made that long-winded, but I just wanted people to be aware of that. It's just a complicated world we live in, and I can assure you with the tariffs going all over the place, it's even more complicated. But look, anyway, thank you so much, Matt, for giving us your time, also giving us your thoughts. I think they were insightful and very interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. This was a lot of fun.
Okay. And look, to the viewers, thank you also for listening in. And I really do encourage you to purchase this book because it is something special. And look out in the awards categories next year, no doubt. But goodbye to everyone. See you later.